Welcome back to The Right Hype. I am your host, Gavon, and today we have a special guest. He goes by the name of Zachary Mallard, and he is a New York City-based experiential director at Alchemia Projects. After a decade of designing and executing experience-driven initiatives for some of the city's best brands and agencies, in liquor, media, and consumer goods. Alchemia was founded in 2020. Zachary is a part of a tight-knit community of artists and skilled laborers obsessed with quality in both approach and execution of experiential marketing. And his unique approach to sensory user experience is the foundation for every project. Welcome to the Right Hype podcast, Zachary.
Hey, thanks for having me. What an intro. It's crazy to hear it out loud,
I'm excited to dive more into your background. We met earlier this year through a mutual friend, Zyra. Shout out to Zyra if you're listening. I know she's an avid listener, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you. I love sort of expanding my network and introducing people to this platform. Tell us about your background and the initial spark that led to the creation of Alchemia Project.
Totally. I'll start by just saying thanks for having me. It's great to be here, even though I guess here is my dining room. And yeah, I'm Zach Mallard. I'm the director at Alchemia Projects. It is a vetted network, as you said, of people I've worked with over the past decade, with other agencies, directly with clients, and throughout New York City and the United States. People that I know are looking to make quality work for the sake of making quality work. It's people whose numbers I saved in my phone along the way and then got back in touch with effectively during the pandemic. My background is I'm a kid that grew up in South Carolina. I went to the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina. I studied sculpture there. I also studied mass media communications. So I was really interested in kind of marketing and PR, but I was also like an art kid. And so I did a bunch of sculpting there. I did a bunch of painting there. I graduated university, as a lot of people do that are art majors, and realized that it was absolutely unsustainable. And luckily I had joined a kind of warehouse project back in the day called Tivoli, and a guy gave me a job working construction, doing kind of like historic restoration, and really developed an appreciation for like building as an art, and also drove a pedicab.
I love that.
That's in after I was working for another artist named Benjamin Hollingsworth, who is an incredibly talented painter and sculptor. And he kind of took me in as a docent or a Padawan. He had been moving back and forth between New York. He was like, dude, you got to move to New York. Like, you're 20. I was like 23. I'd been in Charleston for 2 years or so after college. It was cool, but I didn't have enough money to really make anything happen, not to sound like a horrible capitalist, but it was like, I couldn't open Zach Mallard Gallery. I was going to be working as a bartender or a pedicab driver or whatever. And he was like, go do this in New York. You make more money, you'll meet more people, you'll get better at the art thing because you'll see more art. And so I took that advice and I moved up, and a friend let me sleep on the floor for like probably 3 months right off the Myrtle Willoughby G, which was cool because it was like me at like 23 trying to play basketball at Marcy, and it was like a cool time to be here, And then I started Empire Apothecary. I saw a gap in a market. I went to Blind Barber in the East Village, where I saw guys getting haircuts for like $50. I had seen like how much money was getting passed around in hair and makeup, and I was like, man, these hair products, like I was a kid that like you had Axe and you had Old Spice, you know what I mean? Like I grew up in the South Carolina suburbs. There was a big men's grooming wave coming in with guys having beards and men's kind of classic man haberdashery coming back into vogue. I wanted to be designing and making. So I like bought a bunch of super granola petroleum-free hair products, read the ingredient lists, bought all the ingredients, read a bunch of what are, I hope this isn't an offensive term, but mommy blogs about making super gentle formula, baby pomade and stuff like that. And I just riffed on it from there. And I was doing a lot of hair shoots, and I was like around a lot of guys that were spending the time and money to do their hair. And Instagram, obviously, in the menswear blogger was like really on the rise. I was just in the right pocket for somehow. I started making that product. It got a little bit of traction. I did some good collaborations with guys I knew. I started going to trade shows. I got more traction, and we just kept growing it. And luckily the market supported it. So for years in New York, I was Zach Mallard, Empire Apothecary guy. And I really kind of made my circle of influence that way. Just me bootstrapping it, making it, literally stamping in the beginning, going to Casey Rubber Stamps in the East Village, stamping paper, craft brown paper, cutting it out and gluing it on pomade. And then it got better. That's the thing. It's like you keep doing it and it got better and it got better and it got better. And then it was like we were on the Squarespace homepage. We were in GQ. We were in GQ Taiwan. We're selling on 4 continents. We're like doing the thing, because it's like one foot in front of the other and eventually you'll arrive, right? And so I saw for the first 3 years of going to trade shows, everybody has the same table and you put your stuff out. With Liberty Fair specifically, they had a little thing that was called like the drugstore. And I was like, all right, but we got to like show up if we're going to like act like we're the big, the cool guy. We got to like
Right.
actually bring the noise or whatever. So we designed a custom craps table. We had the custom dice, we had custom playing cards, and then we took it. And the biggest thing you're trying to do at those trade shows is give out samples. Because if someone takes a sample, you're way more likely for them to remember. But there's no emotional attachment to a sample. Hey, do you want this for free? It makes me say, okay, I got it for free. It cost me nothing. It's worth nothing. Right. And so I kind of was like, if we phrase it that the sample is a prize, people will feel more emotion toward it. What did I win? Here's your prize. As soon as they walk up, they go, whoa, what is that? And they come and they want to throw the dice and they're like, whoa, how'd you make this? Blah, blah, blah. And you're having a conversation. You're really engaging with, we live in New York. We do this. We thought it'd be fun. What do you think? Yes, it's fun. Thanks so much. No, you won this. Here you go. Oh, sick. They take it home. Dude, we saw they're taking a picture of it. They're tagging us in the picture of it. It's like, whoa, this is marketing. This is marketing. And it like hit me in a way that was like, I don't want to say like ton of bricks, but it was like a change of like, oh man, I could send out all the sample boxes I want in the world and nobody cares, but like as soon as somebody feels like a winner or potentially avoids feeling like a loser, which is a whole other psychological reality of advertising, you have a hook, you have a hook, you have a relationship, you have an open line of communication. And that's like, was just really cool to me. So years before that had worked, when I was being a busboy and living in Bed-Stuy, I had PA'd for a company called Villain that in the time was in like North Williamsburg, and they were doing experiential marketing. I remember the guys at Villain, and I called Mike Barth from Villain, who's still a good friend. I was like, you remember me? I was a PA. He was like, oh yeah, we love working with you, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, I had that pomade company. He was like, yeah, because I like had sent them candles when I first made the company. He's like, yeah, I remember the candles type thing. He's like, what's going on with that? I was like, well, I sold it, and I partnered and I exited and I'm looking for work, like, do you have any production stuff? And he was like, oh, we just got bought by Vice. Why don't you like come in on a trial and work for us as a producer? And so I just kind of like pulled up, and Mike Barth just like whipped me into shape on how to be a producer and how to run timelines and how to run budgets and how to run a show, and like really just taught me the ropes. I stumbled into the idea of making the craps table for a Las Vegas trade show. And when I saw people's reaction, it gave me the confidence I needed to think, okay, I should just be doing experiential marketing, not running this whole brand. Like all of it was experiential. I had been in catering. I had done work that, I'd been at the Met Gala, passing hors d'oeuvres. I was trying to sell paintings. I was like super hustling for the first like 3 years until we kind of hit that tipping point of being like, oh damn, we have money coming in, and this is a sustainable business, and like not a credit card debt backed business, but a sustainable looping business, and then we kind of grew, and that really changed the trajectory of like what I could do.
Thank you for setting that all out. What are certain things that you felt like you were already primed? You were already maybe even you already sort of knew a lot about coming into this experiential marketing space.
The space part is really a big part. Like I think in another life or an alternate dimension, I would be an interior designer. Being in Charleston and being in sculpture and moving in the building arts and seeing like really beautiful homes and seeing how they were laid out and how you feel different in different spaces. I always like loved that. My mother made our home beautiful and like was a Persian rug expert and like kind of a vintage furniture. She kind of would like bring things in and out of our house and then have like a little spot at like a flea market type pop up, fair thing so that she could, fund her hobby of buying objects of antiquity or whatever, like funny old chairs is the simple way to put it. And I really loved that stuff, like I had time with the rugs and like I think I just like spend a lot of time thinking about interior space and like how and that was really, as a sculpture student, it was like site specific installation stuff, right? So how do you build in this gallery to make the person going through it interact with it, like Richard Serra type stuff, right? Like this is our gallery space, what are you going to install? They used to call this installation art, right? Or site specific installation was kind of the nomenclature thrown around back then. And so I always thought about like, what does the person feel, and it was like, or even early in like sculpting, I was like, I want to make it smell a certain way. And like, they'd be like, what do you like sage the room. And I'd be like, no, I wanted it to be like, not that. I want to like crush up salt and vinegar chips and like put them on the floor and make it smell like salt and vinegar chips in here. And then like before anyone comes in, vacuum them out and see if the scent stays. And they'd be like, why? The memory of like what this is like, this is like a chair from a school bus. And like, I remember riding the bus and it smells like salt and vinegar chips. You know, like, and that kind of like knowing that all of the sensory stuff mattered was like why I, as corny as it is, like called myself an artist. You know, like there were kids that were way better painters and way better crafts people. And I like love the craft of sculpting and hand working and stuff. But like I was more about that. I was like, how loud the music is like the most important part of the party. The sensory, like you go to a cool party and it's just too loud. It's like you can't look at the art. Like people are like, oh, you can't look at the art if the gallery is distracting. And then it's like, but the whole thing is one piece of art.
Yeah.
You know what I mean,
Yeah.
it's like that's always been.
Love that. I love your example about your mom because it makes me think a lot about us as collectors, people who like hoard things. That in itself can be sort of like the manifestation of experiential marketing. It's sort of just making it more tangible, like experiential marketing more tangible in like a day-to-day context is
Yeah.
what you collect.
Yeah, and the marketing part is like the toughest part of experiential marketing. You know, it's
Mm.
like at least for me, like there's a lot of that's what you see. You know, you see. I mean, maybe it's a natural segue of this conversation, but like in my experience, which has been working with client, but also getting hired by agencies to come in as a experiential producer, right? And like say, okay, well, this is who makes this thing that you guys sold to this company that you don't know how to make. You know what I mean? And that's like a fun part of it. But then they're also like, but how are we going to get the clicks? You know, how are we going to like, and I'm like, well, what is your like, and from having like a background in business, I'm like, what's the KPI? What are we really trying to do? And that's like, I don't want to spitball that too hard, but there's some real craziness around experiential marketing that is not about experience, you know? And it's like, I
Mm.
try to always be like, it's about the experience, right? You know, and I'm like, and then obviously everything else sets in, you know, like it has to have the legs, like an experience in a vacuum of just, oh, we spent all this money and we had 1,000 people come have a great dinner and nobody ever heard about it.
When do you know an idea or an experience is worth pursuing?
This is a great question. How do you know that you hit a bullseye? You have to start with a target,
Mm.
right? And it's like you can build the best bow and the best, sharpest arrow and get the best archer, and they can let that puppy rip and it's going to hit something. You know what I mean? And it's like, but the bullseye has to be the target that you define. And so, like, you have to start with what are we trying to do before you can judge how are we going to get there. You know, like,
Mm.
man, we really want to do a cafe. You know, everyone's doing a pop up cafe. And everyone's doing a pop up cafe because brands have the idea that hospitality is the new experience. And that's true. You know, it's like, and it's not new. It's always been that. You know, it's always been that. So a luxury Prada pop up cafe with a beautiful cappuccino with the Prada Milano triangle on top and cocoa powder served by someone that's actually a very hospitable server, blah, blah, blah. Like all of this makes a lot of sense. But like why, right? And like for Prada, it's easy because the why is luxury, and luxury is an easy why. You go, oh, because it makes people feel good, and it makes us look rich, and it makes people feel valued and wealthy in this way of an experience. And so we can just do that cafe thing because we sell an expensive handbag. But if you don't sell an expensive handbag, should you be spending a bunch of money giving away free lattes? Probably not. Does that mean that giving away free lattes is a bad idea? No, it doesn't, right? These things can mutually exist. So it's like you have to sit with the brand. And this is really kind of why I started Alchemia Projects was I got brought in so often as a producer after the idea had been sold and the money had been transacted, right? You know, a lot of agencies are moving into experiential marketing and getting experiential people, but for a long time they were selling experiential ideas that they were going to make the content around. So they pitch the idea has to happen, but they don't know how. And the actual deliverable is the content of that thing happening, right? So this would arguably be the most important part of the equation. But it seems that that gets missed because what really they want to do is sell. And this is like how you avoid a fire fest. You know, it's like start out before you pitch it to the client with some logistics. You know, and that's kind of like the point at Alchemia Projects is we don't pitch things we can't do. Like if you come to me and say, hey, we have $200,000, we need to do a cafe, I'll be like, here's a $200,000 version of your cafe. Here's a $100,000 version of your cafe. Here's a mobile cafe that's 60 grand and maybe we could do it 3 times, you know, and each of these accomplish different goals. Defining what the client needs is number one. And then you see like how much money they want to spend on it. And your question being like, how do you know if you have a good idea? I hate to be like more pragmatic than artistic about it, but it's like, that's how you know if you have a good idea. Does it check the boxes? But one of those big boxes is it creative, and have we seen it before? Like, and if we've seen it before, where is the bar? And are we going to meet or pass that bar? And if it hasn't been seen before, why not? Right? Because a lot of the time people have a first, they're like, no one's ever done this. And sometimes it's like, yeah, duh, but then it's like, no one's ever done this. And it's like, whippy, we finally got it. Like the first person to be like, it's a potato gun, but I put a t-shirt in it. And I'm going to go out to Met Stadium and launch t-shirts into the crowd. And somebody either goes, I don't know, Mark, sounds sketchy. You know what I mean? But then they do it and it works. And everyone goes, yeah, t-shirt cannons, But it's like, you got to really know, like, what are we trying to accomplish? My goal is getting t-shirts to people in the bleachers. How do we get there? Potato gun, And like that works, right? It's like, but you got to define the target. Start by defining your deliverables, and you see, does this meet the need that we have? What is our actual need? Do we believe that is our need? And is this a path to alleviate the pain point that we have, which is not having experiences that define our brand, or not having a deep connection with our audience, or not getting samples in the hands of potential users, or whatever it may be? Or are you just spending money to feed the content machine because the return just isn't there, unless you are a brand that has the money to do so? If you're Coca-Cola, feed the content machine. If you're a sunblock startup doing less than $1 million in sales a year, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know what you need to do, but you don't need to spend 200 grand on one pump. It's convincing clients that you can make a splash by doing the right thing for your brand, not by like chasing the dragon that Prada's doing, or chasing the dragon that Coca-Cola is doing. I think it's like defining what is right for your brand. That's how you know. And that's more just as a marketer. And then the experience has to follow.
What are some of the ways that you are bringing like brands to life through experiences?
I think some of them are going really well. I think the OG one that people sleep on giving the flowers to is Ralph. Like Ralph Lauren's coffee shop, Ralph's Coffee was like, the outfits were great, the cups were great, the product, the coffee is, I don't want to say great, but good enough coffee. It's coffee. The cart that it comes in is cool. That used to be outside of the hotel in Chelsea. I guess that's the Standard High Line. And it's like, they were serving the right audience in the right place with the right thing, the right way, and like, then they still are. And I think that helps build the Ralph Lauren world, because it's a world of luxury and taste and class, and kind of understated, but kind of refined, but still approachable, and it hit all of those things. And then you see Prada coming out, or you see Louis Vuitton coming out and making, beautiful macaroons and stuff like this, because it shows, we're not showing you that we can make a macaroon. We're showing you that Louis Vuitton has an unparalleled attention to detail.
Yeah.
Showing you that we have the most refined taste, and that you haven't even thought about these flavors. You know what I mean? It's like Ray Charles would say about his glasses, you can't even get these. You know what I mean? And it's like that. And that's like the thing, it's like, we are making it exclusive and beautiful because we can, and because life is about enjoying moments of opulence. And we want you to think about that when you think about it. I'm hyper summarizing. I'm sure some marketing gurus will tear me up in the comments, but like, they want to prove luxury is an interaction they give you through hospitality and attention to detail and creating a serene setting. We did a cafe for a trade show because I knew that the company had, I said, what's the point? And this is a great example. The top of perfumes. We did this trade show in Miami. They say, we're doing a trade show booth. They said, we got $60,000. The first question was, have you already paid for the booth? And they said, yeah. I said, okay, cool. Then we'll talk about it. Let's figure it out. And I said, well, don't you guys have a bunch of distributors? And they said, yeah. So I did my research on the brand. I see who's already selling the brand. I was already kind of familiar with the brand. And they go, yeah, we use Magnet Fragrance as our distributor. They'll be at the booth right beside us. And I go, so there's somebody already selling your product next door. And I go, cool. You don't have to worry about selling product, and what you really have to sell is the icon and the logo. And then they'll buy whatever they want from the offerings, but you got to sell the brand, And so I kind of sat with them and I said, look, everyone's going to have a shelf full of stuff. And I've been there before as a seller, and I've been there walking around as a guest. You need to be in a world full of squares. You need to be the circle, right? Because let's do a thought experiment here. I might have already blown it. I want you to think about these things as I say them, okay? A square, a square, a square, a circle. How many shapes did I just talk about?
2.
But really 4, right? So if there's 16 squares in the block of your trade show in one circle, people think they saw 2 things, you and everybody else, right? And so you need to be the circle. And that
Yeah.
allows me, I mean, that's like a fun selling trick if you're taking notes, is that being the circle in the sea of squares is that all the squares look the same. And you get memory. You get memory because you're different. You know, it's like yours, it's so, and so we did this whole cafe setup where we were serving affogatos that were based on the scents, and you could sample some scents, but you could mainly come and sit down and enjoy one of the 4 gourmand offerings at Cafe Latafo of their gourmand scents reimagined as a dessert. Now, we didn't go over the top and brand the desserts. You know, we're serving lemon meringue pie that we bought locally kind of thing, but we're doing it in white dinner jackets with black bow ties, right? We're doing it in a beautiful, we get a nice white carpet. It's clean. It's like, you know, I kind of based the design off St. Ambrose Gelateria, if you know this place down in Lafayette beside the fire department. And I was like, you know, we're going to make a cute little cafe and everyone's going to love it because they don't care about looking at stuff on a shelf. And it only worked because we didn't have to worry about selling SKUs. If they had said, this is our first trade show, we're trying to get SKUs out, I said, okay, we're doing samples and we're going to send people walking around in funny outfits to give out samples so that everybody takes a sample, you know, but we don't need to do samples. These guys are already in the game. You know, it's like, we just need people to go, man, those guys are really doing something cool. I want to do something cool. I should be associated with them, you know, and all the other guys are just floor to ceiling product and it's just overwhelming. And it's like, so what's the point? You make everything, which means you make nothing, you know, like you make a really beautiful Sauvage dupe. And then you also make one that smells like bubblegum. And then you make something that looks like a blueberry as the jar and something, you know, it's like, it shows kind of too much of the sausage being made to see all the SKUs at once, especially for these brands that have a ton of SKUs, you know, which is a nuanced conversation. You know, you don't want to go to a brand owner and go, the problem with the brand is your brand. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to go and say the thing about your business is it's just not a good business, you know, because that's usually not true, right? Like there's usually some good business, but there's always the reality of like, let's filter down and let's serve the people what they really want, which is, man, I'd love to sit down and charge my phone and have a coffee from walking around in this trade show for 3 hours. And who can give me that? That's your friend. If you're outside of the bar at 2 a.m. looking for a cigarette, the guy that gives you a cigarette, you might remember. And it's like, so be that guy, you know, be that guy.
Yeah, I think about that, especially with a lot of friends of mine who do have businesses that they're doing pop-ups or markets where they're like selling their wares. I would love to hear more about Alchemia Projects. The name is so interesting. It feels transformative, experimental. So I want to hear more about that.
The term that often comes to mind is alchemy, which is the turning of base metals into gold. When I was at the gallery for a brief period, they talked about the red thread, and a lot of experiential people talk about the red thread, which is the idea that ties everything together. I refer to that as the golden thread, which is also like the Herculean lifeline idea. And the second half of this name is from the term Assalamu alaikum, alaikum meaning upon you, which is peace to be upon you. In Hebrew, I think it's alaikum salam. No, alaikum shalom in Hebrew, but it still means to be upon you, peace. And so it is something that is upon you. You know, it is something that is being brought to you. It isn't the peace part, right? That's the assalam or the shalom, but the alaikum in both languages is to be put forth to, you know. So an experience is something that we offer people to have and to be a part of, right? So you put forth an experience and people can accept it or they cannot, you know. And that's what we do. You know, we try to put forward experiences that people accept and that weaves that kind of golden thread between your brand or your service or whatever it is that you are and how you associate with the outside world and other people, which are the definitive reality of the outside world, you know. So it's you know, it's corny in a way, I think, to always talk about community, but it's like, my thing is like, who is your community? Who are the people that want you to be upon them? You know, like who's actually like dying to go to X, you know, like people that love sneakers, right? Love sneakers. So if you can do a sneaker event, do it for the people that love sneakers. Don't do it for the people that love making money. Don't do it for the people that love, I don't know, being the hype cool guy. I mean, even though those are kind of sneakerheads, right? Or whatever, but it's like, do it for the actual fans, you know, do it for the actual believers, do it for the people that would come even if you were charging. And then you'll really like be there. You know, that's like the goal in my way is like when we look at brands, and I don't even want to say brands, but like when we look at inanimate objects, how do we animate them? That's the answer, right? And it's like, and a big way is collaboration. You know, like how do you take a liquor company and make it about not liquor? You know, it's like, oh, we pair it with bands, or we pair it with athletes, or we pair it with business people, or we pair it, you know, kind of thing. And it's understanding who wants that product and who you pair with and what you pair with. You know, it's like we don't serve Macallan samples in a Balenciaga showroom, and we don't put Balenciaga samples in a Macallan showroom, you know, because it's like, why does this feel like, you know, the Balenciaga shopper doesn't want to feel like they're in a rustic, you know, English countryside manner, and the guy, the 60-year-old guy in the barber jacket, doesn't want to feel like he's in a fun house full of mirrors with some guy dressed in a trash bag. You know what I mean? And like Balenciaga, if you use that, I expect to be paid. But also, like, you know, you just got to know, I guess, or you got to do the research, you know, and at least try to know your best.
This is a fun question. What's the scrappiest thing you've built?
We did a scrappy one during the pandemic, which was freelance with the Villain Vice crew. And it was with the Fat Jew, who owns Babe Rose, which I think was just about to be acquired by Anheuser-Busch. But Babe Rose and the Fat Jewish were putting out content about honey those nails, because all the manicure shops, the nail salons, were all closed. So it's like April or May of 2020, right? And so the Fat Jew decides with their like agency, which I forget, they have a name for it, but for Babe Rose, that they're going to make a nail truck that will go around, you know. And eventually we made the nail truck out of a Ford Transit Connect. But before we did that, I have some great videos of me like no shirt on in this warehouse building this, like literally building and bondoing this thing. We got a U-Haul trailer and we built a wooden box around it and cut holes in the side for plexiglass. And we put 2 manicure artists in the back of this, and we drove the U-Haul trailer that had been outfitted as a tiny nail salon with the Babe Rose 1989, like OJ Simpson edition Bronco through like Williamsburg and Greenpoint for people to come up and get their nails done and get content. But I mean, we built that thing, like rented the U-Haul trailer at U-Haul, drove to the Home Depot, got the wood, put that together. But I mean, that pales in comparison. So that's experiential marketing. But there was a period in 2020, kind of after that gig, where Alchemia really started, and we were building outdoor seating for people. Because I had fabrication friends and I knew people in nightlife, and I was like, we're built out. And that was some of the scrappiest work that I might not even talk about. But I mean, that was scrappy. That was like 2020 was a lot of plywood on walls and like putting signs on the plywood and being like, I will take this down for you if you let me keep it. And then turning that into the floor of an outdoor seating, you know, like if the grapes don't sell, dry them up and sell raisins kind of stuff. Like the pandemic was scary as an experiential person. You're like, oh, you can't, no more than 6 people in a room. Well, there goes my whole career. You know what I mean? Like, it was rough.
I feel like this whole entire conversation has been sort of like how humble beginnings have like turned into these like massive like projects and payoff moments, which I think is sort of like speaks to the inside of this podcast, is like how we're all sort of like doing a lot of different things and how we've been able to cobble it together to build something that can stand on its own and stand the test of time. So as we're sort of like wrapping up, I want you to think about people who are coming into this experiential marketing space, whether they are producers or they're a brand builder. What are some advice that you would give to someone who's listening?
See the city and know people and remember people. I'll put you in my phone as like Gavon Breakfast, right? Or I'll put someone in here as like Doug Wild Posting, or like Bobby Mural Painter, or whatever, because like that's your Rolodex. And like our generation doesn't talk about that and doesn't think about that in the sense of like, it's like your Instagram followers and people you DM, that's not a Rolodex, because you're not talking about money right there. When you're talking about business, you're talking about business. And it's like, and knowing who to talk about business with is huge, you know, and like being, you know, it's like there's a
I was
great,
just talking to my friend about that.
yeah, it's like be serious about some, like when you're at work, you're at work, and act like you're at work. If you want to get into experiential marketing, find the shitty PA gigs and like learn who does what. And like if you're young enough and can afford to intern somewhere, do it for a little bit, you know, just long enough to like see what the words mean. You know, because like a creative director or an art director or like all this stuff, it's like it doesn't really say it doesn't mean anything, but it's like there are people that are like, we're looking for a creative director copy, or we're looking for a creative director art. And you're like, okay, so that's someone that was a junior, that was an editor that became a junior copywriter, that became a copywriter, that became an art director, that became a creative director. Like this is a path. You know, you need to learn all the words and you need to meet all the people that are already doing it.
Yeah.
Go to the stuff, be cool, dress nice, be nice, you know, like you're going to reap what you sow, and like don't take too much bullshit, you know, like people will, once you get like, once you can take the training wheels off, do, you know what I mean? Like as soon as you realize that like you can really hit the ball, you know, it's like, okay, time to get in the game. You know, and like, I don't mean not to be humble, but like, I see a lot of people either come in really, really arrogantly confident and have nothing and done nothing, or just confident. And that works, sadly, much better than the people that have come in and actually done a decent amount of work and know how things work, but still think they're not ready. You know, it's like
Yep.
take the floaties off. You know,
Yep.
like don't get stuck in first gear. It's like if I really crash right now, it's going to be a lot worse than if I crashed at 24.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. I appreciated you sharing just like a lot of the insights behind experiential marketing, as well as just encouraging younger folks, people who are getting out there in the field, to experiment a little bit, do things that are a little bit different in order to stand out. Um, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing all the projects that you have
Yeah.
coming up.
Send help. Yeah. If you need to do something, maybe I'll hire some of these people. Let me know.